Hello, my name is Monica Williams, and this is a video that I've created for mostly my students, but anyone who is looking to learn more about the very basics of the Native American flute. Within this group, I'm going to post regular videos, more isolated on individual topics, but this video is kind of a crash course. It's what I cover in my first couple of classes for Native American flute. Whether you've played previously or you're just picking up the instrument for the first time. Today I'll be demonstrating on a high spirits A flute, just because that's what I use with a lot of my students, so if you want to play along you can do that. I encourage you to pause this video if you want to try the different techniques, that way you can practice right away and then come back to it later on. I'll also give you suggestions for practicing, so that you can develop your skills further on this beautiful instrument. So the first thing I usually talk about when I talk about just starting the Native American flute is how to hold it and how to cover the holes. Most students find it very challenging to cover this bottom hole, perhaps even this one. Right now I have this 5th hole or 6th hole covered up with a leather strap. If for some reason your flute didn't come with a leather strap, you can always cover it with a piece of electrical tape or make your own piece of leather strap. And the reason for this is just that these 3rd, 4th fingers on the hands aren't quite as strong and are a little more difficult to cover. And it's because we're only using the first 5 notes, at least right now, for the pentatonic scale. It just kind of gives you a little bit more control of our scale. So we're going to leave this down for today. That's the 6th hole. That's covered right there, the 3rd hole from the top. So the first thing I talk about is just covering the holes. And there's 2 different approaches, and I'll do both of those approaches. The first one is to do a scale, and in our scale for the Native American flute, we start with all of the holes covered, and we lift up 1 finger at a time. And you can do this just as I'm doing it without actually blowing into the flute. You can do it in front of a mirror. A lot of times people will put their hands up like this, and then you can see the back of the flute is not quite as covered. Another thing you can do is just to have just the teeniest bit cracked. Let's see, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, so you see like that. That is not going to produce the right sound. If I had all my other fingers covered in just that one, it might make a little screechy sound. So let's start with actually just the first 3 and work on putting 1 finger down at a time. Now, but to produce a sound in the Native American flute, you blow very gently into the flute, kind of as if you were blowing on a candle, so it was constantly flickering but never actually going out. And I find that this 3 holes covered is kind of the nice medium point to start producing a sound. And you want to blow a very steady airstream from your stomach, not too much, not too little. If you blow too much, you're going to kind of get a metallic sound. If you blow too little, you might get a wispy sound. When playing the Native American flute and producing a sound, try to cover just a bit of the top hole with your top lip when you blow into it. That way you will use a little less air and be able to go longer times, longer phrases. So let's start on these first 3 notes, 3 fingers, which is going to create a note, and it should sound like this. And that's all you're going to do. And then you're going to add 1 finger down at a time, or going down in the scale. So I'm going to add my index finger in. And if you're starting this for the first time, you might want to actually pause the video and just practice that. If you have gotten some notes that don't sound right, maybe this bottom note in particular sounds kind of squeaky, it's like high and it's supposed to be low, there's 2 reasons for that. Either my bottom finger is not covered all the way, so see if you can seat it very gently and cover all of the hole. Or maybe I'm not using enough or too much air on that bottom note. So if I use too much air, I'm also going to pop to the overtone, that higher note. So the lower you go in the flute, the less air you use. The higher you go, the little bit more air support you actually use as you go through the flute. So again, just starting with these 3 notes. And getting all of those three out. You'll also notice that as I hold the flute, my fingers are kind of conforming to the wood. They're not too far out like this. They're almost a little bit over the hole. So it's really the pad of my fingers. If I press the key hard here, the hole hard here, you can maybe see that there's an indentation. That's where the hole should actually be covering in order to get the greatest coverage. And another little thought as you begin this is try to not grip the flute really hard. That may cover the holes more, but you're going to be uncomfortable playing long term. So we want to keep our fingers very, very free and delicate on the holes. That way you'll be able to open and close them with greater control and comfort, and we don't ever want any hand problems as we go along. Okay, once you've got that where you're going down the scale, we can work on the upper part of the scale. So we're going to actually start the whole scale now. And if you're still working this bottom note, this is the greatest struggle. Just keep working on it. You know, eventually you'll be able to pull it up and be able to get that note out right away. Going up the scale, we're going to lift one finger at a time, going in the downward direction to the upward direction. So we're going to start in this bottom note. And then only the hole that's covered with the leather strap should be open at the end. And then you're going to put down from the top. This you can practice as a daily exercise. If you are just new to this flute, practice that scale going up and down, and don't get frustrated if one of the notes doesn't come out. It's probably that your fingers are not seating right on it. So you want to just keep and kind of get some muscle memory. Working in front of a mirror or your camera can be very, very helpful as you see which fingers are being put up and down. The next step, once you've got that, and this is a big first step, that's like the main thing, is you really want to work on this pentatonic scale going up and down. Once you've got that, is to begin kind of making up your own songs or improvisations based upon this pentatonic scale. And this will give you a little bit of creativity while still getting the fundamentals of picking up and down your fingers. So what I might do is some long notes and then some short notes like this. And I'm trying to do that in one breath, so I'm breathing in deeply from my stomach and kind of sighing out, not using too much air pressure, not using too little air pressure, and just going up and down that scale. Long, short, long, short, long, short. And again, if you don't have this strap covered, be sure that this ring finger is staying down on this top hand. And that was under one breath, and that's called a slur in music when we do one breath, so it's really, really, really smooth. The next thing we're going to talk about is some articulations, how to begin the sound if we want to do just a single note and make it more defined. And I do that by actually using the syllable ta. And I can start that on every note with the syllable ta, and it'll sound different. You'll hear that there's a little bit of a space and clarity in between each individual note. I oftentimes get asked, can I do this just by singing ha, like this? And the answer is yes, but you're not going to be able to do it quite as quickly, and nor are you going to be able to get the definition to start the note quite as nicely. So literally when I'm saying ta, I just do it like I'm verbally saying it. I keep my tongue at the top of my palate, and I say ta. And you can do this by feeling on your palm. You just want to do a syllable ta, and you should feel a little burst of air, not a ton, but just enough to start the sound. You can do this with repeated notes. Again, I like to go back to my three top holes covered and practice this articulation, this tonguing, single tonguing. And I do several in a row. Once you can do that and get a clean sound, it's time to add on our whole scale. So we're going to go back to these bottom fingers, and for the purpose of an exercise, you can pick however many notes to do in a row. And this is just an exercise to get familiar with this for this single tonguing. We'll get to double tonguing in a second. So let's do 4. So I'm going to do 4 on each of these notes on my pentatonic scale. So it'll sound like this. And then you can go down as well. If you get a sound, and you actually heard one when I did that, that's kind of a squeaky sound, maybe that just means that you're using too much air, and that's very common when you're begin the articulation. And the reason for this is because when you're actually tonguing, your tongue comes up, and it can actually let off more air than you were doing when maybe we were making that nice long note. So we want to kind of measure out how much air we're releasing at one time. So every note should come out nice and clear, like a nice little bell. And then the next step is what I just did, is just to do one note on each fingering. Once you get that, and again, if you're just new to this, I might pause the video and just practice the single tonguing as you go up and down the scale. It's time to mix it up. So you're going to do some of the notes that were smooth, the slur, and then some tongued notes. And you can see I've already made a little bit of a song by just doing a couple of those little elements, going up the scale, going down the scale, doing it slurred, doing it tongued, and then I couldn't put in the different rhythms, doing it long and short. So after you've practiced each element, the long notes where it's slurred, the scale, the long, short, and the single tonguing, try and kind of implement those and make a very, very little short song that's your own, but that's you're practicing those particular details in. Okay, once you've got that, it's time to do a faster articulation, and to do this we need what's called a double tonguing. So we need another syllable. We use ta for the single tongue, ta 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 ta. But I can only go so fast going ta 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 before my tongue trips on itself, so I need a different syllable. I'm going to use a ka. You can also use a da and ga. It's just a forward syllable and a back syllable when I'm doing my tonguing. So I can go ta ka, or da ga, da ga, da ga. My favorite thing to do while I'm teaching this to students is to actually use a word that might help in facilitating this. So for the da ga, you can use digga, 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 ditch, digga, ditch, digga, ditch, digga, digga, ditch. And then you try and implement that on the flute. But before you actually put up the flute, you can actually take your palm of your hand and do those syllables with a little burst of air, because that's what's going to happen when you do those syllables. So you're just going taka, 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 ta. And with each syllable, there's a little burst of air. And that's going to be what creates the sound on this. And so then the question comes, why? Why do I need to do this? Why can't I just use ta, 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 ta? Because you're going to want to go real fast. So it's something like this. I couldn't do that if I was single tonguing it. And it's a really cool skill to be able to do on the Native American flute as I go up and down my scale. That sounds really cool. So practice that, and first just practice it, remember, with saying the taka, 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 ta, or daga, 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 da. Oh, and for the taka, if you want to use a word, the expression would be take a trip. Take a trip. And they're both fine. You can practice both and choose which one you like the best. There's not one that's better or worse. They will both work just the same. I will say that I prefer to use the digga, 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 ditch one for the Native American flute, only because it's just a teeny bit more gentle for the wood instruments. But you can experiment with that and figure out which one you prefer. Next thing is some more ornamentations that maybe are kind of bendy, so you can get a sigh sound, this beautiful sign that's kind of a swell, and it's used so much in Native American flute, like this. And I just pulled my hand up to demonstrate that, but basically I'm taking and rolling my finger off the key gently, and that creates an upward bend. I can also do it down and go. The slower I go, the more bends I'm going to create. Really a very, very cool technique. That one thing that I'd like you to practice is if you start on your bottom note of your scale, so all the holes covered, and you pick up one finger at a time, and when you get to this index finger, it's kind of the easiest one to do this on. Roll it off gently, so it goes like this. And you can do that on any finger, but you'll find that the ring fingers are a little harder to do it on. You can hear I got a little pop because as soon as my finger wants to come off on this one, it kind of wants to come off on this one. So just because of that, I tend to do it more with all the other fingers except that.